My beloved child, stop and listen carefully, because what just happened in your life isn't something ordinary. It's eternal, it's divine, and it's irreversible. You've just crossed the invisible line, the one so many stop short of, the one that tests not just your strength but the alignment of your spirit to mine. I saw you when everything inside you screamed to quit, but you didn't. That moment, that unseen, quiet moment when your faith chose me over everything else, that's when you crossed it. Most people never reach this line because it demands surrender beyond logic and worship beyond feelings. You didn't even know you were approaching it, but every painful step you took, every betrayal you overcame, every silent prayer you whispered, it brought you closer to this divine threshold. And now, you've passed it, not because of your power but because of your persistence when no one was watching. And child, that matters more in heaven than what the world celebrates. This invisible line separates those who know of me and those who walk with me. It's the dividing line between shallow belief and unshakable identity. You didn't just survive the test, you were transformed by it. And I urgently tell you now, don't you dare downplay this moment. Don't you dare let the enemy trick you into thinking this breakthrough is small. You've entered a sacred space, a spiritual territory that only the refined, the broken but still standing, the bruised but still worshiping ever reach. You are now carrying something weightier, something heavier, something heaven-breathed, and with it comes divine responsibility. I'm whispering this to you now with urgency because you need to understand. The warfare wasn't random. It was an announcement. Hell knew you were about to cross something invisible but irreversible. That's why the pressure increased, why the silence felt louder, why you were isolated before being elevated. This isn't about reward. It's about revelation. I have marked you now, and once marked, you cannot unsee what I've shown you. You will now hear differently, sense deeper, discern sharper. You will walk into rooms and shift the atmosphere without opening your mouth because what you carry speaks even when you're silent. Child, the line you crossed isn't celebrated by crowds, but it echoes through eternity. I had to break you to bless you correctly. I had to undo what was built on the wrong foundation. I had to empty you before I filled you. But now that you stepped across that line, I need you to understand this. You will not return to who you were before this. You cannot go back to familiar thinking, comfortable relationships, or conditional obedience. You were refined in fire, not to be fragile, but to carry fire. The assignments that will be revealed to you from here forward are only understood by the few who dare to walk where others refuse to tread. This isn't about being better than others. This is about being bolder in me. You'll be misunderstood, questioned, even isolated again. But now, you'll know it's not punishment, it's preservation. I didn't bring you through all of that to leave you confused. I brought you through so you'd finally recognize the line that was never visible to others, but was always part of my blueprint for you. And child, I speak this urgently to your spirit now. You are on the other side of obedience, and that changes everything. You need to hear me now with a weight you've never carried before, because you are not stepping into something new. You are stepping into something ancient that has finally opened for you. Before you ever cried your first tear, before you ever took your first breath, I had already written your arrival into this very moment, and now the fullness of that divine appointment is unfolding. Heaven has marked it. All of heaven is watching because what you've entered isn't by chance. It is prophecy fulfilled in motion. You were not created randomly. You were chosen precisely for a set time and set place, and you just walked into it without realizing that every delay, every rejection, every silent night with the precise escort that brought you here. This moment didn't form because of your effort. It was activated by my timing. And that timing, child, is not ordinary. It has been in motion from eternity, woven into the fabric of creation, synchronized with the breath of angels and the thunder of my voice calling destiny into alignment. You are not behind. You are not early. You are right on time for something that cannot be undone. This moment is not about arrival in the way the world defines it. This is about recognition in the realms of spirit. The enemy hoped you would die in the wilderness, that you would give up just before this unlocking. But you didn't. And now, the seal on what I buried in you long ago is being opened, not because you finally achieved enough, but because you endured long enough to be trusted with what others would have corrupted. And I say this with urgency because I need you to understand. This season will not look like the past. This won't be a slow build. This will be swift, sudden, and sacred. Doors will not just open, they will respond to your presence. People will not just notice you, they will be drawn to what I have placed inside you without knowing why. This is the realm of divine appointments. I'm not placing you in rooms to observe, I'm positioning you to influence. Your voice will no longer be overlooked because it was never meant to echo in empty places. It was meant to ignite destinies in the chosen. And child, this isn't favor for the sake of feeling special, it's placement for the sake of legacy. What you touch now will not only bless you, it will shift bloodlines, mend histories, rewrite patterns. You will see the fruit of what your ancestors prayed but never lived to witness. You will become the answer to prayers prayed generations ago, not because you were the most qualified, but because you were the most surrendered. That's why heaven marked your arrival. I delayed you until surrender became your language. I kept you in hiddenness until your heart stopped striving for platforms. And now I can trust you to move without ego, to speak without compromise, to walk with glory without stealing it. This isn't promotion, it's permission. And to be of a trust to of a man. You will notice it even in how the earth reacts around you. Things will align, conversations will shift, resources will flow, not because you're forcing them, but because the realm you're in now operates by a different law. You have crossed into prepared territory, and when I prepare something, it cannot be shaken, delayed, or denied. So move like you are marked. Speak like heaven is listening. Decide like legacy is on the line. Because it is. And I say it again with fire in my voice. Heaven has marked this very second of your life. This isn't the beginning. This is the unveiling. You thought it was your willpower, your persistence, or even your last ounce of hope that carried you through those hours when everything around you collapsed. But what you felt in those breaking points was not your own resilience. It was me, breathing resolve into the cracks of your spirit. In those unseen hours when your body trembled from exhaustion and your thoughts waged war inside your mind, I leaned in close, not with loud declarations but with quiet power, placing endurance inside your core where no one else could reach. Every time your heart said, "I can't take one more blow," I countered it with a surge of divine energy, and you stood. You didn't even realize it then, but your ability to keep walking was not the absence of pain, it was the presence of my intervention. What sustained you was not natural strength but supernatural infusion. And I must say this with urgency now, because you need to understand the sacredness of what carried you. If you assume you made it through because of personal resolve, you'll start relying on the same when the next assignment unfolds, and this path requires full dependence on what comes from me, not what rises from within. My strength didn't visit you occasionally. It lived in you like fire hidden beneath ash, waiting to blaze when everything else fell apart. There were moments when the weight should have crushed your vision, when the silence should have buried your confidence, when the confusion should have swallowed your identity. But I held your soul in divine tension between collapse and continuation. That was not survival. That was strategy. I didn't let you break because the blueprint I wrote for you required completion, and I will not allow an unfinished story where I've declared victory. The reason people couldn't understand how you kept showing up, how you smiled with swollen eyes, how you served with an aching heart, it's because they didn't hear the voice that was speaking to you underneath your breath. I was there, not just observing but fueling, not just watching but pouring strength into every corner where despair tried to take root. And now, as you walk into rooms where others only see your outward form, know that I see the hidden testimony carved into your spiritual DNA. I see the chapters written in tears, in groans, in unspoken prayers. You carry invisible evidence of divine intervention. And I say again, urgently, Do not forget the source. You are entering a realm where applause will echo, where some will try to credit your wisdom or your charisma or your effort. But I need you to always remember, you didn't make it here by talent, but by grace-fueled endurance. The very breath in your lungs during those final moments of giving up was not oxygen alone. It was my spirit reviving the will to live, to believe, to finish. And this matters because what you carry now isn't simply purpose. It is weighty authority born from surviving battles that others never even recognized were taking place. This power didn't come from platforms, achievements, or associations. That was formed in pressure and preserved by my whispers. So move forward, with reverence. Do not make the mistake of assuming this strength is renewable by rest alone. It flows from ongoing intimacy with me. That is where your soul was restored. That is where your fire was relit. That is where your yes was strengthened. And from this moment forward, you will feel the difference. What you once called motivation, you'll now recognize as divine voice. What you once thought was just emotional resolve, you'll now see as the hand of heaven tightening your grip. You will never see weakness the same way again, because now you know what it means to be held up from within by something not of this world. The next time you feel empty, don't search outward. Return to that sacred silence where I speak strength into your bones. That's where you will find me again, doing what I've always done, keeping you when nothing else could. Everything you walked through wasn't a coincidence dressed as hardship. It was a divine assignment disguised as adversity. What came against you wasn't random chaos. It was intentional pressure designed to reveal what couldn't be seen in comfort. There were moments you questioned why everything around you seemed to fall apart just when you were trying to move forward. The opposition didn't show up because you were failing. It came because something eternal was beginning to activate within you, and that made you a target. I want you to grasp this with urgency. Your trials weren't punishments. They were confirmations. The intensity of your storm exposed the weight of your calling. The people who turned away from you, the doors that slammed shut, the misunderstandings that surrounded your name, they weren't roadblocks. They were signs. Signs that you were being separated for something sacred. You weren't left out. You were set apart. I allowed the battles to reveal your alignment. When others walked paths paved by popularity, you were led through terrain carved by purpose. That difference wasn't accidental. It was prophetic. You weren't just passing through trouble. You were being marked in the fire as mine. I chose you not because you had all the answers, but because your heart kept returning to me when everything else failed. That kind of loyalty cannot be manufactured. It is proven. And I let the proving happen in places where you thought I was absent, but I was closer than breath. You didn't know it then, but the very battle that made you weep was the one that sealed your selection. What threatened to break you was the very thing heaven used to establish your authority. The battles weren't meant to destroy your faith. They were allowed so your faith could withstand destruction. And now, because you endured, you carry access to realms others pray to enter. You didn't ask for this weight, but I placed it on you because I knew it wouldn't crush you, it would construct you. Everything you faced was coded with purpose. That's why you couldn't quit, even when quitting would have made more sense. That's why your spirit couldn't rest in compromise, even when comfort called your name. That's why your dreams stayed alive, even when your circumstances screamed defeat. You were never fighting for survival, you were fighting for revelation. And now, revelation is pouring into every part of you that once felt forsaken. Your steps are not ordinary. Your journey is not average. Your presence carries the evidence of spiritual warfare survived. People may admire your strength, but they will never fully comprehend the invisible weight you had to carry in order to become who you are now. And I say this now because it must be understood. You weren't chosen after the battle. You were chosen before it ever began. A warfare didn't select you. A calling did. The enemy saw what you hadn't even discovered yet. That's why the attack came before the opportunity. That's why your name was slandered before it was celebrated. That's why confusion hit you hardest just before clarity erupted. Because the enemy doesn't waste his strongest weapons on those who pose no threat. And child, you were never a threat because of what you had. You were a threat because of what you were becoming. I shielded you, not from pain, but from spiritual death. I allowed wounds, but I did not allow defeat. And today, as you look back, I want you to see the battle differently. See it as a mirror, reflecting the fact that you were never common, never overlooked by heaven, never misplaced. You were chosen, and everything tried to talk you out of it. What it didn't win, you did. And because of that, what comes next won't be accidental either. It will be another layer of confirmation. Your journey was not built on ease. It was built on evidence. You fought, and that alone speaks louder than anything they tried to silence. There was never a single drop that fell from your eyes that slipped past my gaze. Not one moment of anguish, not one silent sob in the dark, not one deep exhale of despair went unnoticed. I was there in every collapsing moment, not just watching, but capturing, preserving, holding each tear like treasure. You believe you were alone, unseen, unerred, but I was closer than your skin, counting what others ignored. Every droplet that traced down your cheeks carried a language that only heaven could interpret. While the world overlooked your breaking, I was listening to what your pain was speaking louder than your words ever could. Your tears were prayers in liquid form, not failures, not signs of weakness, but sacred offerings poured out in complete honesty. I stored them, every single one, not because I needed reminders of your pain, but because I intend to turn them into testimony. They were not wasted. They were not thrown into the wind. I preserved them because they carried something too holy to discard, the essence of your surrender. And now, that season of grief has met its divine response. The cries you thought vanished into silence are returning as answers wrapped in timing so specific, you will know it was me. This is not compensation. This is divine justice. You didn't cry for attention. You cried from the place where hope and pain collided. And I am honoring it. I say this now with urgency because the hour has come where your weeping has reached its end, and joy is rising like the sun after the longest night. The weight you endured in the quiet was never denial. It was sacred delay to prepare a fulfillment that will carry eternal weight. You will now see answers that match not just the depth of your tears, but the purity of your heart while you cried them. There were days you could barely lift your head, but I was lifting your destiny behind the scenes. Every time you collapsed under the ache, I dispatched comfort that shielded your soul from breaking beyond repair. You felt like nothing changed, but I was changing everything while holding you steady. That's why you're still here. Not because you avoided sorrow, but because you allowed yourself to be real with me in it. And I value that kind of honesty. I value it so deeply that I turned your mourning into seeds, and those seeds are now erupting into promise. What you couldn't explain then will begin to make sense now. The losses, the disappointments, the moments you had no language for, they will be answered not through explanations but through transformation. I'm not just responding with comfort. I'm responding with restoration. The joy I'm releasing won't erase the memory of your tears. It will give them meaning. They were not pointless. They were prophetic. And child, hear me with clarity. What is coming will not just make you smile. It will make you understand. Understand why I delayed. Understand why I allowed the heaviness. Understand why certain people didn't stay. Understand why the breakthrough didn't happen when you wanted it. Because now, on the other side of your sorrow, I can trust you with what can't be mishandled. The tears humbled you. They softened your edges. They made room for reverence. And in that reverence, you became capable of carrying what cannot be birthed through talent alone. You became the kind of vessel I pour into when I want to reach others. The weight you carried was sacred, and now, what you receive will carry the fragrance of that sacredness. Others will ask how you kept going, and you will point to the tears, not with shame, but with authority. Because you didn't hide your pain, you allowed it to become prayer. And now your prayer has become manifestation. Watch what I do next. The tears were the beginning, not the end. They didn't understand you, so they ridiculed what they couldn't recognize. They pointed fingers at what didn't fit their expectations, not realizing they were criticizing what I intentionally planted within you. They called it strange, I called it sacred. They labeled it weakness, I knew it was wonder. When they dismissed your uniqueness as a flaw, I saw the exact element I would use to shape the atmosphere through your life. The parts of you they laughed at were not errors, they were hidden blueprints. Every time they rolled their eyes or whispered behind your back, I was engraving their rejection into a deeper level of your destiny. Child, you were never meant to blend in. I didn't form you to mimic the patterns of those around you. I formed you to disrupt cycles with the sound of your very existence. That awkwardness you felt growing up, that inability to conform, it wasn't dysfunction, it was divine distinction. And yes, they mocked you. They misjudged your silence. They took your dreams lightly. They twisted your motives. But what they didn't see was that I was shielding you from being shaped by their approval. Their insults became the resistance that sharpened your spiritual spine. Their dismissiveness became the soil where I planted deeper identity. I'm speaking this to you now with urgency because you are about to stand in places where the very thing they mocked will become the reason doors open without explanation. The gift they couldn't see will shine without permission. What they rolled their eyes at will now cause others to lift their hands in worship. I allowed their mockery because I needed to detach you from needing their validation. Had they accepted you, you would have leaned on them. But I needed you leaning on me. That isolation wasn't punishment, it was a purification. And now, the version of you that emerges is no longer confused about where your worth comes from. The fire they mocked has turned into revelation. The softness they criticized has become power under control. What they once labeled as too much is exactly what I'm now using to break boundaries open. They mocked your passion, but I turned it into oil. They mocked your consistency, but I turned it into endurance. They mocked your worship, but I turned it into warfare. And the most profound part is this: I let them mock you while I hid what I was building inside you, because I didn't want them near the foundation. I couldn't allow their voices to shape your early process. They would have watered down the fire. So I used their mockery as a fence to keep them out while you grew in places they couldn't access. That's why it hurt so deeply. That's why their words hit harder than you expected. Because you loved some of them. You trusted some of them. But their laughter wasn't light. It was a reminder that the oil you carried was only recognizable by those who walk with me. And now, I need you to walk with boldness, not bitterness. You must not carry resentment. You must carry revelation. Because the time has come for me to put my spotlight on what they refused to see. What was mocked in private will be magnified in public, not to humiliate them, but to honor what I placed in you. I'm not elevating you for attention. I'm elevating you as evidence. Evidence that I take what others toss aside and turn it into weapons of glory. Evidence that I build my finest warriors in obscurity. Evidence that no mockery can cancel my design. So lift your head, not in pride, but in holy awareness. You are walking proof that I use what man misjudges. You are the fulfillment of what they said would never happen. And I'm just getting started. There were moments when you looked at the timelines around you and questioned your own. You watched others succeed quickly, achieve early, rise fast, and deep inside, you started to wonder if you had missed something, fallen behind, lost your place. But I need you to hear me now with unwavering clarity. You did not miss a single thing. You were not behind. You were not delayed. You were not forgotten. You were being reserved. My timing is not like what the world teaches you to chase. I don't build greatness through rush. I sculpt it through depth. While others were sprinting ahead, I was rooting you into something eternal. You didn't need to move quickly. You needed to grow deeply. I never called you to be the fastest. I called you to be unshakable. The reason I let you walk the longer path was not to punish you, but to prepare you for what others could not carry. You were not being overlooked. You were being precisely timed. Every event, every encounter, every closed door, every reroute, all of it was lining up to release you at the exact second when everything around you would be ready to receive what I placed inside you. You felt stuck, but I was synchronizing. You felt stagnant, but I was securing. You felt unseen, but I was structuring the stage that only I could open. I did not want you to explode and fade. I wanted you to last. That's why I withheld things others received early. That's why you were delayed in the eyes of men, because I was designing something too weighty to rush. I'm speaking this to you now with urgency because you must shake off the belief that you were late. That belief is a lie. You arrived in the precise window of divine release. If you had been earlier, you would have compromised. If you had been quicker, you would have collapsed. But now you are arriving in perfect condition, under divine atmosphere, with tested character and refined vision. You are not walking into your moment confused or desperate. You are entering focused, grounded, and equipped. And the power of that is this: the very people who once saw you as behind will now see that you were simply being aligned with a higher cadence. They will realize that what you carry could not have been formed in shortcuts. There was no fast track to this kind of substance. You didn't just wait, you became. You were not idled, you were incubated. The timing I set over your life was not just about you. It was also about what I was building through you. I had to prepare environments. I had to shift hearts. I had to remove threats. I had to close pathways that looked appealing but led to collapse. You were not denied, you were defended. So now, I need you to walk without regret. Don't mourn the time you think you lost, because in me, nothing is ever wasted. I restore what seemed forfeited. I redeem what looked missed. And I release favor on timing that no one can replicate. You are about to experience the beauty of divine arrival. Not just arriving, but arriving with such clarity and authority that people will marvel at how it all happened so suddenly, never realizing that it wasn't sudden. It was sacred. You didn't come late. You came when the oil was ready. You came when the fruit had ripened. You came when the fire inside you was no longer flickering but blazing. And now that you're here, don't hold back. Don't apologize for the timing. Don't compare it to another's. You are not here to copy. You are here to carry. Carry what I entrusted to you through long nights, heavy days, and silent seasons. This moment is your divine alignment. Walk in it like it was always yours, because it was. You watched them move faster, celebrate more often, receive recognition, step onto platforms and be applauded by voices that never once called your name. And in that stillness, you began to question what was wrong with your pace. But child, what you couldn't see then is that I was not rushing your journey. I was rooting your foundation. While they were sprinting into visibility, I was leading you into depth. What looks like an activity from the surface is often the most powerful construction underground. I chose silence not to starve you, but to sculpt you. I chose hiddenness not to withhold, but to prepare. You weren't stuck, you were sacredly stationed. While noise surrounded others, I gave you solitude so your soul would not be shaped by applause. I gave you quiet so that my whisper would become the loudest sound in your spirit. And what I built in you during that silence will not fade, crack, or be shaken by shifting seasons. It is eternal, not temporal. What they ran toward will fade when the crowd grows tired. But what you carry will echo long after others are forgotten, because I formed it in stillness where only heaven applauded. This wasn't punishment. It was preservation. You didn't get skipped, you were outspared. You didn't lose momentum. You gained eternal substance. Every quiet room you sat in, every unnoticed effort you gave, every time you felt bypassed, those were holy moments. While the world rewards visibility, I reward stability. And you, beloved, were being stabilized in silence so the weight of what's coming wouldn't crush you when I opened the floodgates. What they gained in speed, you gained in substance. What they collected in moments, you are about to release in movements. You were not delayed. You were being dimensionally designed. I crafted thoughts in your mind that would never have survived the noise. I formed depth in your heart that couldn't exist in shallow waters. I exposed idols within your desires and healed wounds that the world would have ignored. I taught you how to walk without needing to be seen. I trained your spirit to move when no one was clapping, to believe when nothing was visible, to love when nothing was given back. That kind of character can't be produced in crowds, only in silence. And now, I need you to carry that silence with you. Not as emptiness, but as evidence. Because what I build in quiet places becomes unshakable in noisy ones. And what's coming will be loud. It will attract voices, opinions, and attention, but none of that will sway you, because I've taught you how to listen in the stillness. You'll discern what's real, not by volume, but by alignment. You'll walk into places where people speak many words, but you'll only respond when you hear me. That's the power I've given you, not the power of performance, but the authority of stillness. They will ask where you learned this depth, how you walk with such clarity, why you don't rush, why you don't crave stages, and you'll smile, because they'll never know the weight of what was built in the dark. You'll know that the silence didn't delay you, it defined you. So walk forward now, not with a need to catch up, but with the peace that comes from knowing you were sculpted by the eternal hand of heaven. You don't need the crowd. You never did. You need the presence. And now that it's filled you, nothing around you can move what was born inside you. This is not your introduction. This is your unveiling. And it was worth every quiet second I spent building what could never be undone. There were moments when all you could hear was the beating of your own heart, echoing in a room where answers never arrived and voices faded into nothingness. You assumed the stillness meant I was far away, that maybe I had turned my attention elsewhere, that perhaps your cries had dissolved into forgotten air. But what you couldn't see, what you were never supposed to see, is that while you stood still, I was orchestrating movements in dimensions beyond your sight. The silence wasn't a void. It was a blueprint. You felt the stillness as delay, but I was drafting detail with sacred hands. Nothing in your life was idle. It was intentional. I hid my voice not to hurt you, but to heighten your sensitivity. I removed noise so that you could hear the shift in spiritual winds before the breakthrough even arrived. In the silence, I didn't give you answers because I was building discernment. I wasn't withholding instruction. I was developing intuition. You didn't realize it then, but that quiet season was one of the most strategic intervals of your entire journey. That's where I placed layers inside you that couldn't have survived the noise. Layers of wisdom, courage, spiritual understanding, and prophetic perception. While you thought you were waiting, you were being prepared. I was downloading insight into your spirit that would only make sense once you step into the situations I designed for you. I couldn't explain everything while I was building it. Blueprints aren't handed to the building while it's under construction. They are guarded until the work is done. And now, I'm showing you what was really happening behind the scenes of that silence. Every unanswered prayer became a brick. Every quiet morning became a foundation. Every tear-soaked evening became a frame. I wasn't ignoring you. I was constructing the very thing you were crying out for. But I had to make sure you could handle it without running. That's why I gave you space to wrestle, to question, to stretch without snapping. That's why I didn't interrupt your sighs. I sanctified them. I made the silence holy. And what was birthed in that sacred stillness is now your greatest tool. Because in this next season, when others panic at the lack of clarity, you will move with calm confidence. You'll recognize divine pause as a signal, not a setback. You won't mistake my silence for absence ever again. You'll know that when everything around you seems quiet, it's not because nothing is happening, it's because everything is aligning. You will become a voice of strategy to those who feel stuck. And you'll be able to lead them not with noise but with certainty. Because you've lived it. You've walked through the stillness where the only sound was your faith choosing not to quit. And now, I'm sending you into places where people are trapped in cycles because they misread silence. You will show them what it really means, that silence is the language of construction. It is the signal that something holy is being assembled. The world craves constant noise, instant answers, immediate gratification. But I made you different. You know how to wait. You know how to sit in the quiet and still believe. You've learned the rhythm of divine timing, and that knowledge is power in the days to come. So don't ever despise those silent seasons again. Don't look back at them with confusion or regret. Look back and see what I see, a sacred chamber where strategy was born, a hidden place where you and I met without words, where I taught your soul to recognize me in the stillness. That is a gift many never receive. What you did. And now, as I begin to unfold what was formed there, you'll realize just how full that silence always was, overflowing with my wisdom, my timing, my hand. You never lacked direction. You were living inside the strategy itself. They didn't see it. They didn't notice the war waging behind your smile, the quiet courage it took to keep standing when everything inside was collapsing. They didn't recognize the spiritual weight pressing on you in silence, the invisible battles you were enduring without complaint. You weren't just going through life. You were walking through fire while keeping your heart soft. And I watched it all. While others saw your daily routine, I saw your daily warfare. They applauded your visible achievements, but I measured what they couldn't. Your restraint when you had every reason to react. Your obedience when disobedience would have been easier. Your faithfulness when doubt seemed louder than truth. What you were walking through wasn't just hardship. It was a divine examination. A test not for display but for destiny. Not graded by man's standards, but by heaven's scales. I placed it not to break you, but to reveal what could no longer remain hidden, the maturity forming in secret. And beloved, you passed. Not because you did everything perfectly, but because you stayed. Because you didn't run. Because when no one was living, you judged with right over what with he. I tested your integrity when no one was around to reward it. I observed your heart when applause was absent. I gave you choices in private to see what your soul would do without eyes watching. That's the place where real weight is measured, not in what is shown, but in what is sustained. You passed not just one test, you passed layers of testing woven into days that seemed ordinary. And I must speak this with holy urgency. The next door opening for you is not based on effort. It's based on endurance. You're about to walk into the fruit of silent victories. You're about to experience what it means to be trusted with increase, not because you sought it, but because you proved that your character could hold what others would have misused. These tests weren't designed to humiliate. They were intended to prepare. I gave you moments where your reaction could have cost you your credibility, but you chose silence. I gave you relationships that could have corrupted your purity, but you chose boundaries. I gave you opportunities to inflate your ego, but you humbled yourself instead. And child, that matters more than you know. The spiritual realm was watching. Heaven took note. Angels documented the moments you bit your tongue, withheld your hand, walked away from offense, chose love over vengeance, chose discipline over impulse. You didn't even realize a test was taking place, and yet, you still honored me in the shadows. That's why this new season will look so unfamiliar. Because I'm handing you authority that only comes after unseen faithfulness. What's coming won't feel like promotion. It'll feel like alignment. Because your spirit is already at the level I'm elevating you into. The world won't understand how you got here, but I will. Because I remember the day you sat in silence when you could have exploded. I remember when you sowed generously even when you had nothing left to give. I remember when you forgave and kept forgiving. I remember when you refused to manipulate outcomes and let me handle what was mine. You passed, not because you sought to impress me, but because you allowed me to mold you. The difference is critical. You didn't chase performance, you chose surrender. And that surrender has opened up realms others cannot access. You are no longer in the classroom of refinement. You're stepping into the demonstration of everything that was cultivated. So walk boldly, not arrogantly, but with deep awareness. You are standing on the other side of a test they never saw, and the reward will be undeniable. There were seasons where it felt like you were hidden behind walls that wouldn't move, doors that wouldn't open, and silence that wouldn't lift. But child, what you called isolation was actually insulation. I shielded you on purpose. I placed my hand over your development like a gardener protects a fragile sprout before it breaks the surface. No one saw what I was building in you because I kept them from seeing it. I didn't allow premature exposure. I didn't let opinions infect your progress. You wondered why no one recognized your effort, why your potential seemed overlooked, why your voice remained unheard. It was because I was guarding the soil while the roots grew deep. You weren't buried. You were being covered for cultivation. Every part of your becoming was shielded from outside interference, because I couldn't afford for anyone to tamper with the holy architecture forming inside your spirit. People often reach too quickly for platforms, craving visibility, but I hid you to protect your purity. What you carry is not casual. It is weighty. And weight must be grown, not grabbed. I kept certain relationships from attaching themselves to you, not because you were unworthy, but because their proximity would have corrupted what I was shaping. I know how to keep threats at bay while destiny is forming, and that's exactly what I did with you. I did not allow commentary to twist your view of who you are becoming. I did not permit access to those who would have rushed what needed time. You didn't see it then, but I was working in layers too delicate to be touched by anything but my spirit. I speak this now with intensity because what I protected is now ready to emerge, and you must never mistake the silence of that season as abandonment. It was design. I didn't let certain people recognize you because their words would have stunted your depth. I didn't allow invitations into rooms you thought you deserved because those rooms weren't built to contain the fire I was placing inside you. Had you been exposed earlier, you would have adjusted yourself to fit the comfort of those spaces. But now, you will step into the right places with no need to shrink or pretend. I preserved your essence by restricting your reach. Now that you've grown past needing approval, I can trust you with visibility. But this visibility won't change your identity, because it's being birthed from integrity, not insecurity. Your growth was sacred, and the sacred must be guarded. I wrapped you in divine camouflage, not so you'd be ignored, but so you'd be safe. While others rushed to be seen, you were stretched to be strong, and that strength was built under my covering. What you know now, what you've discerned in silence, what you've endured in hiddenness, it has shaped you into someone unshakable. And child, I want you to understand how rare that is. Most people grow around noise and end up fragile when storms hit. But you were watered in stillness. You were shaped without spectators. You matured under pressure, not performance. And now, I am lifting the veil. What I grew in you is too impactful to remain hidden. But I had to make sure that when others finally saw it, you wouldn't hand it away to gain their praise. You've been tested in obscurity. You've been trained where no spotlight could reach. And now, you're being released from my covering, not because I'm withdrawing my protection, but because you are now strong enough to carry what once needed to be shielded. You won't be shaken by attention. You won't be swayed by applause, because you know what it costs to become who you are. And no one will ever be able to take that away from you. They saw fragments of your journey, the parts you allowed them to glimpse, but they never witnessed the depth of what you carried behind your eyes, beneath your silence, beneath your "I'm okay" when you were anything but. They couldn't measure the weight because it was never theirs to carry. They didn't sit with you when your thoughts spiraled in the night, when your spirit was stretched so far you weren't sure if it would snap or strengthen. But I was there. I held every ache, absorbed every breathless moment, listened when you had no words left. And now, I say this with holy urgency, what you lived through in secret is about to be displayed as undeniable evidence of my hand on your life. You didn't survive for survival's sake. You endured as testimony. There's a glory rising from your pain that cannot be denied. What didn't kill you has become the very thing that qualifies you. The quiet agony, the misunderstood storms, the private losses, they have become the receipts for your authority. You never asked to be broken, but you trusted me with your breaking. And now that trust is turning into proof. Proof that you walked through fire and emerged unburned. Proof that you were pressed but not crushed. Proof that though no one saw the weeping, they will see the harvest. The strength they'll witness in you didn't come from books or stages. It came from being held together by grace when everything tried to tear you apart. And the beauty is, you never use your pain to manipulate. You didn't broadcast your trials to earn pity. You stayed low. You stayed surrendered. You kept showing up when quitting made more sense. It's why what's about to unfold will silence doubters without needing an explanation. You won't have to defend your process. The fruit will speak for itself. I hid your pain to protect its power. It was never meant to be put on display while it was still raw. I needed to seal the wounds before the unveiling. And now, every scar you carry, the ones no one asks about, are about to shine like beacons. Not to glorify suffering, but to reveal how I transform ashes into beauty. Those who once questioned your depth will now witness miracles flowing through your hands. Those who thought you were weak will see unshakable wisdom in your decisions. Those who laughed at your delays will watch you move with such divine momentum that no one will be able to trace how you got here. And that's the point. It wasn't meant to be explainable. It was meant to be undeniable. Because only I know the cost. Only I understand the depth of your sacrifice, the tears shed in silence, the surrender whispered in solitude. You will never again be dismissed, because I am placing undeniable weight on your voice. You won't need to shout. You'll walk into rooms and shift the atmosphere by simply being present. That's what pain turned into purpose feels like. It carries a gravity that can't be faked. So don't hide what you've walked through, wear it like armor. Not as a wound, but as a witness. You are proof that the cry can be called, that the bruised can still bless, that the ones the world overlooks are often the ones I'm building for the greatest impact. And they will see it. They will recognize it. Not because you've changed to become palatable, but because I've transformed your pain into something they can't deny. Get ready to carry what once carried you. Get ready to speak from the place that once silenced you. You are no longer a victim of your past. You are the evidence of my faithfulness written in flesh and blood. They don't need to believe your story. They will believe your fruit. You misunderstood the pressure because it felt like punishment. You assumed the weight was too much because you weren't built for it. But what you couldn't see in the moment was that I was shaping you for something far greater than comfort. I was molding you into a vessel that could hold something eternal. What appeared to be destruction was divine construction. Every time you thought you were falling apart, I was stretching your capacity. Not to destroy your foundation, but to deepen it. I had to let certain things collapse so the counterfeit wouldn't remain. The systems you depended on, the relationships you clung to, the plans you proudly drafted, I allowed them to unravel so you would no longer settle for anything less than what I authored. I didn't cause the devastation, but I permitted the shaking. Because only in the shaking could the shallow roots be exposed. Only in the crumbling could the hidden cracks be addressed. You didn't fail. You were being reformed. And I need you to hear this clearly, because this is where everything shifts. I was never out to ruin you. I was drawing out what I placed in you before you were ever wounded by this world. I was awakening the glory buried beneath the layers of survival. I wasn't trying to weaken you. I was teaching you the difference between strength that shouts and strength that endures. You see, glory cannot be placed on something fragile. It must rest on something forged. And you, beloved, were forged it. Not with ease, but with precision. I used fire to refine you, not because I was angry, but because I saw what was possible when all the excess was burned away. I allowed discomfort because the comfort zone would have diluted your capacity. I permitted resistance so that resilience could grow. And now, what you carry is no longer shallow inspiration. It is weight. It is oil. It is glory that has been purified in secret places. I say this urgently, Don't look back and curse the process. Don't resent what I used to make you ready. It wasn't cruelty. It was consecration. I was aligning your spirit with an assignment that demands substance. I saw the weight of what's coming, and I refused to let you enter it unprepared. I wouldn't let you carry fragile identity into spaces where unshakable knowing is required. I didn't want your gift to take you where your character couldn't keep you. So I slowed you down. I stripped you gently. I refined your hunger. And in that refining, I was depositing glory, not a borrowed version, not an imitation, but glory that arises from a life that has been surrendered beyond convenience. The type of glory that shifts atmospheres when you walk in. The kind that makes demonic structures tremble before you ever speak. The weight that carries healing in your silence, authority in your movement, truth in your gaze. It doesn't come from talent. It comes from transformation. And child, you've been transformed. You're no longer who you were. Not because you tried harder, but because you allowed me to finish the breaking that exposed your real foundation. The world may think you're just recovering from hard times, but I know you're emerging as a carrier of what many long for but never yield to. This is not the beginning of your healing. This is the release of your glory. You will carry what others dropped. You will speak what others refused to hear. You will hold what others fumbled. Because you said yes, not when it was easy, but when it was excruciating. And that yes has echoed through heaven. I was not trying to ruin you. I was refining you so that what I pour into you next won't be wasted. And I'll get ready. Because what's coming isn't about spotlight. It's about stewardship. You're no longer standing on the edge, hoping something will change. You've entered the realm where your belief begins to pull things from the invisible into the seen. This is not the season of waiting and wondering anymore. This is the season where your trust becomes a trigger. You've crossed over into the dimension where obedience is no longer just preparation. It's the switch that ignites manifestation. What once required effort to believe, now requires authority to receive. I've watched as you chose faith when nothing around you confirmed it. You spoke my promises into rooms filled with silence. You walked forward when every sign told you to turn back. And because of that, you have arrived at the threshold where heaven starts responding in real time. This space isn't accessed by striving, it's opened by alignment. And you, beloved, are aligned. Not because you got everything right, but because your heart kept returning to me every time it drifted. You have entered the territory where fulfillment is not accidental, it is assigned. Promises that seemed dormant are now awakening because your atmosphere has shifted. The climate of your soul now agrees with what I declared before time began. And I speak this with urgency, because I don't want you to miss what's already in motion. Things are now obeying your movement. What used to resist is now releasing. What delayed you is now dissolving. What was locked is now loose. You are no longer asking from the outside. You are moving from within the place of covenant. The enemy will try to make you think you're still waiting, still circling, still hoping something shifts. But I am telling you, you are already in the fulfillment zone. Now your words must match it. Now your posture must mirror it. This is not a time to play small, to question what's already yours, to rehearse doubt like it still has a vote. The moment your faith aligned with my instruction, the movement began. Not in the physical first, but in the eternal. And what has been activated in the eternal cannot be unmade by the temporary. That's why I've been so intentional with your development, because fulfillment requires maturity. Now that you've arrived here, I need you to function like someone who is no longer begging for breakthrough, but manifesting it. Stop asking me for what I've already placed in your hands. Begin to declare it, move with it, build from it. The terrain has changed beneath your feet. You are walking on fulfilled territory now, not as a guest, but as an heir. When you speak, things will respond. When you move, things will realign. Not because of who you are in yourself, but because you're operating from the place of faith that is fully submitted. That level of surrender is what created this moment. That consistent yes the one you whispered through tears and setbacks, was not forgotten. It became the key. And now the gates are open. The fulfillment is not future, it is unfolding. You are no longer sowing into delay. You are harvesting from obedience. And the fruit that's about to emerge won't look like compensation. It will look like prophecy fulfilled. People will call it sudden, but you'll know it was layered. It was built. It was appointed. You didn't arrive here by accident. You were led here by fire, by cloud, by correction, by grace. And now, the space you stand in responds to your faith differently. It moves at the pace of your trust. This is where faith isn't just belief, it's blueprint. And with every step you take now, fulfillment will follow behind you like a shadow. Walk like it's done. Speak like it's yours. Live like you were born for this, because you were. You thought time was working against you. You assumed the unanswered moments meant something had gone wrong, that perhaps you missed a window or lost your place in my plan. But what you couldn't see from where you stood was how many layers I was synchronizing, not just for your benefit, but for the purpose I've embedded into your very being. You didn't lose anything. You weren't disqualified. You were being placed with precision. What you called delay was my hand adjusting circumstances, preparing the terrain, softening hearts, and weaving together outcomes that couldn't be rushed. It wasn't that I wasn't moving. I was moving everything. I was arranging timelines, refining atmospheres, and even holding back certain blessings until you were standing in the right position to receive them without compromise. Delay was not denial. It was protection. It was preparation in disguise. Had I released too soon, the gift would have overwhelmed your current capacity. Had I said yes before the appointed time, you would have tried to carry what required deeper maturity. So I waited, not because you weren't ready to dream, but because I needed the dream to meet you in wholeness, not in exhaustion. I was aligning things that you didn't even know needed fixing. I was rerouting what others were tampering with behind the scenes. I was removing threats you hadn't even recognized. I was stripping away the counterfeit options so you wouldn't settle for less than what I had actually promised. And now, I need you to look again, not with frustration, but with revelation. The season you thought was stagnant was strategic. The closed doors were direction. The pauses were placements. I was teaching you to walk with me, not run ahead of me. You were learning to trust without tie lines. A kind of trust builds unshakable foundation. And that foundation is exactly why you're now ready for what's coming. The acceleration you're about to experience won't be frantic, it'll be seamless. It will look effortless to others, but only you and I know how long the groundwork took. The pieces I was putting together had to fit perfectly. Not rushed. Not forced. That's why I whispered wait when you were ready to move. That's why I closed options that looked ideal. That's why you felt like nothing was shifting, when in truth, everything was shifting into order. I had to let you walk slowly so you wouldn't build on unstable ground. You are not entering randomly. You are stepping into something measured. I designed it with you in mind, with every detail shaped by what you've endured, what you've learned, and how you've grown. This isn't just alignment around you. It's alignment within you. Your desires are now purified. Your focus is clear. Your heart no longer chases what drains it. That inner alignment is why external alignment is finally unlocking. And I say this now because you must release your disappointment. Let go of the timeline you built in your own understanding. It was never wasted time. It was essential time. And now, that time has brought you here, into divine intersection, where preparation meets opportunity, where identity meets assignment, where the waiting ends, and the unfolding begins. What comes next will not require you to strain. It will require you to step. And every step will feel like confirmation. Don't second-guess it. Don't apologize for how it arrives. You won't need to chase it, it will fit you because it was designed to. Every tear, every surrender, every moment you stayed faithful when nothing made sense, it brought you into this moment. The delay was not working against you. It was working for you. And now, it has finished its work. Alignment is here. Now walk in it. There were moments when the rejection pierced deeper than you expected. You thought that opportunity was meant to carry you forward, that the yes you prayed for would arrive through that path, that connection, that plan. And when the door slammed shut, sometimes without warning, sometimes without explanation, you questioned what you did wrong. But John, what do you call denial? I call direction. Every time you reached for what looked promising but wasn't aligned with my purpose for you, I intervened. I wasn't blocking you to frustrate you. I was guiding you away from what could never hold the weight of your calling. Not all open doors lead to glory. Some lead to compromise wrapped in temporary success. Some look like favor but carry distraction. Some offer visibility but dilute your voice. I know the plans you can't yet see, and I shut what didn't deserve your presence. I rerouted you away from counterfeits that could have captured your attention but poisoned your assignment. The job you lost, the relationship that fell apart, the platform that overlooked you, all of it was part of a redirection that was never meant to be gentle, but it was always meant to be good. You only saw the door. I saw what was waiting on the other side. I saw the compromise it would demand. I saw how it would deter your growth, limit your reach, shift your posture. And so, I shut it. Not to punish you, but to protect the integrity of what I'm birthing through you. Every closed opportunity was a wall of mercy. I let you feel the weight of the door closing, but I didn't let it crush your hope. I gave you just enough discomfort to release it, and just enough vision to believe for more. You see, I'm not interested in giving you everything. I'm interested in giving you what's holy. And what's holy is not always what's flashy. What's holy doesn't always come early. But what's holy always lasts. You weren't rejected. You were reserved. I hid you from places that weren't ready for the version of you I was still building. I withheld you from tables where your voice would have been silenced. I removed you from paths that would have drained your spiritual fire. I closed what looked like progress because it would have pulled you into patterns I never wrote for you. And now, I'm leading you into what's consecrated, set apart, designed for your soul, not just your resume. What's ahead of you won't just open doors. It will open destinies. You won't have to force your way in. You won't have to change yourself to fit the room. You won't have to negotiate your identity to gain entry. Because what I'm bringing you into was molded with your name etched in its foundation. You'll step into it and realize, this is what I was waiting for. This is why that other door closed. This is what the delay was making room for. I need you to shift your perspective. Stop mourning the no. It wasn't loss. It was liberation. Let me replace your disappointment with discernment. The doors I close are just as miraculous as the ones I open. Sometimes even more so. Because they reveal how tightly I guard what's holy. I'm not just crafting your future, I'm preserving your purpose. And to do that, I will close anything that threatens to interfere with what I've placed inside you. You can trust my closures as much as my releases. I am not cruel. I am careful. And what I'm about to open for you will make every prior shut door feel like a gift. Because when I open it, you'll see it. It was never rejection. It was redirection toward something holy. You saw it pass by and thought, that was my moment. You watched them walk away and wondered, was that the right person? You looked at the timeline of others and questioned, did I wait too long? But I am telling you now, you didn't miss what was meant for you. I intercepted what was never sent by me. Not everything that looks like favor is authentic. Not everyone who speaks the right words carries the right spirit. Not every open hand is offering a gift. Some opportunities come dressed in light but are rooted in deception. Some people are sent not to build you but to drain the fire I placed within you. I had to step in. I had to shield you before you attached your trust to something disguised as destiny. I know what you need better than you do. You ask for blessings, and I prepare protection. You seek advancement, and I bring discernment. You reach for connection, and I bring clarity. Because I love you too much to let you tie your future to anything that would corrupt what I'm creating inside you. That's why certain things didn't work out. That's why you felt a sudden pause when everything seemed perfect on the surface. That's why what looked promising quickly faded, because I exposed it before it could entangle you. You weren't being overlooked. You were being insulated. While you longed for what felt right, I was preserving you for what was righteous. The counterfeit will always arrive first, not to bless you, but to distract you. It comes early, hoping to catch your hunger before you're fully rooted in me. It offers fast results with hidden costs. But I've been training your spirit to recognize my tone so you don't settle for familiar patterns just because they mirror past dreams. I never wanted you to marry an illusion. I never wanted you to invest in assignments I didn't authorize. That's why I intervene. Even when you begged me to let you go forward. Even when you wept, thinking I was holding something good from you. Even when your heart cracked under the weight of delay. I was active. I was present. I was separating you from things that felt right but lacked my breath. Some doors looked right because your wounds still shaped your vision. But I had to heal you before you chose again. Some people sounded like destiny, but they were sent to derail it. And I didn't allow you to bond to anything birthed outside of my design. I was guarding your next chapter from contamination. And now, I say this with urgency, what's coming will not just look good. It will be good. It won't come with confusion, manipulation, or double-mindedness. It will carry peace, confirmation, and fruit. What's real won't require you to shrink, compromise, or carry the weight alone. What's mine will match the growth I've produced in you. The protection I provided in the form of no was never rejection. It was preparation for something pure. Don't grieve the exit of what I never ordained. Celebrate the clarity. You don't need to revisit what I've already removed. Let the counterfeits fall away so the real can take its rightful place. I am not trying to frustrate your hope. I'm refining it. Because hope that is tied to illusion will always disappoint. But hope anchored in me will never collapse. You haven't missed your moment. You've been marked for something that deception cannot touch. And soon, when it arrives, it will not only make sense, it will make history in your life. You'll know without striving. You'll discern without guessing. Because it will carry my presence, not just potential. What you've waited for is not behind you. It's ahead, and it's holy. It hurt when they walked away. It shook you when they suddenly became distant. When people you thought would stay for the long journey quietly exited without warning or closure. You tried to search for what you did wrong, retracing your words, overanalyzing your actions, wondering if you were too much, too intense, too different. But child, what you didn't realize then, and what I need you to grasp now, is that their absence wasn't your failure. It was the fulfillment of something necessary. I allowed them to leave not because you were unworthy of love, loyalty, or consistency, but because they weren't equipped to walk beside someone carrying what you carry. I've placed something inside you that stretches beyond the surface, something sacred that demands a depth not everyone is willing to reach. Your purpose was never light. It was never meant to be managed by shallow connections. You were never called to build legacy with those who only tolerated your presence, but never discerned your anointing. I separated them from your path to preserve the oil you didn't even know you carried. Some people weren't meant to go where I'm taking you, not because they were evil, but because their presence would have hindered the activation of your next. You tried to hold on to what I was gently pulling away, and I let you wrestle with the grief so you'd understand the weight of what I was protecting. You see, I don't just remove people. I release you from attachments that can't support your assignment. Their proximity may have been comfortable, but it wasn't covenant. I saw the pride that would have grown in their hearts as you elevated. I saw the insecurity that would have cloaked your every breakthrough. I saw the quiet competition that would have eroded your peace. So I intervened. I loosened the ties, shifted the energy, rearranged the alignment, not to punish, but to prepare you for something more pure. You don't need to feel guilty for their departure. I allowed it, I orchestrated it in silence while you mourned in private. And now, I want you to stop asking why they didn't stay. Start asking what I'm making room for. Because the ones I'm sending next will not only recognize what you carry, they'll honor it. They'll speak to your spirit, not just your surface. They won't flinch when the weight of your purpose becomes heavy. They will retreat when the warfare intensifies. They'll be graced to stand beside you, not shrink beneath you. And that kind of connection can't arrive until you release your grip on what was. I know it hurt. I know it left unanswered questions. But I need you to shift your focus from who left to who's coming, and more importantly, to who remained. I never left you. I stayed through every exit. I comforted you while you tried to explain their silence. I caught your heart when it dropped from another unannounced goodbye. And I've been walking with you, slowly building a foundation that's not dependent on human approval. Because what's ahead of you requires boldness that isn't fueled by applause, and endurance that doesn't collapse when people disappear. You carry something holy, and not everyone can handle holy. Some get uncomfortable in the presence of what convicts. Others distance themselves when they realize they can't control or contain what's divine. That's not your fault. That's their limit. And I'm calling you higher now. To stop chasing closure. To stop romanticizing memories. To stop reopening doors I've sealed. I've made you strong through separation. I've made you focus through heartbreak. And I'm placing you among those who will see you not as competition, not as convenience, but as covenant. So dry your tears over who didn't recognize you. Lift your head. Because I always did. And soon, you'll see why their departure was the doorway to divine connection. I never take without giving better. Trust me, what's coming will not leave. You spent too much time trying to fit into places I never called you to remain in, shrinking your spirit so others wouldn't feel convicted, softening your truth to make others comfortable, questioning your design because it didn't gain the approval of those who never carried the capacity to see what I placed inside you. But I did not pour oil upon your life so you could be liked. I anointed you for impact, not popularity. I clothed you in authority, not for applause, but for purpose. And child, I say this with divine urgency. Stop bending your anointing into something more palatable for people who were never meant to steward your gift. What I've placed inside you was not made to be measured by human scales. It wasn't shaped to be placed on platforms of validation. I gave you a mantle, and mantles carry weight. Your oil came through crushing, not compliments. It was birthed through obedience and not opinion. That's why you often feel like a misfit among many, because you were never intended to follow their patterns. I formed you to disrupt what has been normalized. Your presence alone shakes rooms because it carries something not manufactured, but cultivated. And I must remind you now, if you keep altering yourself to fit into what I called you to transform, you will lose the fire that makes you effective. Your anointing is directional. It points you toward assignments that don't need permission to begin. It activates in places that are dry, where nothing else is growing, because I designed you to release rivers. You weren't called to echo others, you were born to release sound. Sound that tears through spiritual confusion. Sound that awakens what has been sleeping. Sound that establishes divine truth in places that have been operating under compromise. That kind of call will not win you trophies. It will cost you comfort. But it will also place you exactly where I need you, in moments of divine collision, where heaven's intention meets the earth's desperation. That's where your anointing flows best, not in rooms where it's admired, but in assignments where it's required. And that's what I'm preparing you for now. I'm shifting your gaze from crowds to covenant, from branding to breakthrough, from image to impact. The weight you feel is not a burden. It's the stretching of your spirit to carry more than what you imagined. Stop trying to explain your calling to people who only value convenience. Stop waiting for confirmation from those who have never spent time in my presence. You don't need their affirmation. You have my commission. I'm sending you not as a representative of religion, but as a carrier of fire. You will enter places others avoid. You will speak when others remain silent. You will move with clarity when others hesitate. Why? Because your anointing wasn't given for attention. It was crafted for holy assignments that cannot be delayed. And child, when you begin to walk fully in that reality, doors will no longer be your concern. Favor will follow obedience. Provision will meet every step. Strategy will flow as you move. You'll see how I equip in motion, not before, but during. You've been waiting for full visibility before you say yes, but your anointing doesn't need proof to move. It simply needs surrender. You were set apart, not sidelined. You were anointed, not auditioning. The oil I've placed on your life is not subtle, it's disruptive. And that's exactly what this generation needs. So no more filtering yourself. No more apologizing for your boldness. No more taming the fire to keep lukewarm people comfortable. Your anointing was never for their approval. It was always, and will always be, for the fulfillment of divine assignment. You moved through seasons where your efforts felt invisible, your prayers unanswered, your sacrifices unnoticed. You poured your heart into places that never acknowledged your offering. You gave when no one clapped. You served when no one cared. You stood in integrity when no one validated your stance. And you questioned whether it was worth it. But let me speak now with holy clarity. I saw everything. While crowds gathered to celebrate performance, I leaned in to honor your posture. Where others were measuring success by visibility, I was weighing your spirit by obedience. You didn't go unseen. You went uncelebrated by those who didn't carry the eyes to recognize glory in hiddenness. They didn't notice the night you chose to worship with trembling hands. They didn't hear the cries you buried beneath your breath. They didn't feel the cost of your private yes, or the sting of walking alone down paths I assigned you. But I did. Heaven recorded it all. Every unseen act of righteousness was a deposit into the eternal. Every unnoticed seed you sowed was multiplied behind the veil. What man fails to applaud, I reward with fire. Because I don't reward appearances, I reward faithfulness. And child, I want you to understand this deeply. While they applauded what glittered, I anointed what endured. Your strength wasn't broadcast. It was built in quiet places, in the daily decision to keep going when applause was absent. Your name may not have been echoed in their circles, but it is whispered in heaven by those who recognize kingdom resilience. Angels were dispatched not in response to what you did in public, but by what you maintained in secret. That consistency you thought was ordinary, it reached me. The humility you fought to keep, it pleased me. That moment you forgave in silence, chose love when revenge would have felt easier, turned the other cheek when no one would have blamed you for retaliating. Those choices made the heavens stand in reverent stillness. And now, I speak this urgently. What I'm about to release into your life is not a random outpouring. It is a divine response. Not to what people saw, but to what you did when they weren't looking. Your reward is not the reflection of popularity. It is the inheritance of perseverance. You chose character over charisma. You chose truth when lies would have been more convenient. And because of that, I'm trusting you with glory that others can't carry. The crowd's absence was never your disqualification. It was your consecration. I remove you from their gaze so I could cultivate you without interruption. Had you been praised too early, you might have built for their attention instead of my presence. That's why I kept you low. That's why I didn't allow you to be seen in the way your heart craved. Because I had to make sure your roots went deeper than your reach. And now that they have, now that you're no longer moved by validation or silence, I can trust you to carry what comes next. And when it comes, some will say it's sudden. But you and I will know it's sacred. Because it was never for them to understand. It was for heaven to release. So don't bore the moments you were unseen. Rejoice. Because they became altars. The very obscurity that made you feel forgotten was the tool I used to form unshakable identity. And now I'm sending you forth. Not for revenge. Not for applause. But for assignment. And those who overlooked you, they'll watch. Not because you sought their attention, but because they'll witness what heaven rewards when no one else is looking. You were never invisible to me. You were being seen where it matters most. And now, it's time to step forward with confidence, knowing that while the crowd stayed silent, heaven was watching all along. You saw the stillness and called it delay. You felt the quiet and assumed you had been forgotten. But I was doing something far deeper than you realized. I wasn't punishing you with obscurity. I was purifying you in it. I pulled you away from the noise not because you lacked purpose, but because your purpose required preparation that couldn't be done under public gaze. What I was forming in you needed to be built without the pressure of performance. The holiness I'm cultivating doesn't grow in spotlights. It's birthed in the secret place, in moments where the only eyes upon you are mine. You longed for movement, but I was anchoring you. You asked for visibility, but I was sanctifying your vision. I didn't want the applause to shape you. I wanted my presence to mark you. I separated you not to isolate, but to consecrate. I took you into the wilderness so I could remove what couldn't enter your next. I silenced the voices around you so mine could be the only one that remained. There, in the quiet, I stripped away every layer of approval addiction. I dismantled every false narrative. I exposed hidden wounds. I healed them, not with quick words but with fire. I taught you how to live with nothing external affirming you, so you'd never again be led by human praise. You kept asking when the doors would open, when the promotion would come, but I was more concerned with who you were becoming behind those closed doors. I wasn't keeping you small. I was making you sacred. And that difference is everything. What I'm calling you to walk in requires purity that's not surface deep. It demands a heart that can't be bribed by status, a mind that won't bend to compromise, a spirit that won't sell itself for recognition. That's why I hid you, because I had to strip you of everything that would fracture under pressure. I allowed discomfort to sanctify your motives. I let delay develop discernment. I used invisibility to build integrity. Because holiness isn't about appearing righteous, it's about being set apart for something higher. And child, you are set apart. You're not just gifted. You're chosen. You're not just talented. You're trusted. And that trust didn't come cheaply. It came through tears no one saw, surrender no one clapped for, obedience that cost you more than you admitted. And I watched it all. I held you through it. I whispered truth when lies shouted. I cradled your identity when the enemy tried to tear it down. And now, I say this with fierce love, the holiness formed in secret has made you ready for the unveiling. What's ahead will require more than charisma. It will demand consecration. You won't just speak, you'll carry. You won't just lead, you'll embody. What flows through you will carry weight because it was purified in hidden fire. And when you walk into rooms, you'll no longer need to prove anything. You'll simply be, and that will be enough. Because when holiness fills a life, the atmosphere bends. Chains break. Hearts shift. Not because of volume, but because of substance. That's what I've been forming in you. Not a message, a mantle. Not a performance, a presence. And now, the veil is lifting. But don't lose what made you holy just because the world wants you loud. Stay close. Stay low. Stay listening. Because holiness isn't a moment. It's a rhythm. And the rhythm we've built in secret is the one that will sustain you in visibility. So no, you weren't overlooked. You were being made whole. You were being made holy. And that, child, is more powerful than anything the world could offer. This is no longer the time for hesitation or soft declarations. The atmosphere around you has shifted because the authority within you has matured. You are not speaking into the void. You are speaking into divine alignment, and what you release from your mouth carries the weight of my intention. Every word formed in truth, soaked in surrender, and fueled by faith will now trigger movement. You've stepped out of merely hoping and into commanding. Not from pride, but from posture. You are standing on ground prepared by obedience, And from that place, your voice now echoes differently. Heaven responds. Hell trembles. Creation waits. What you utter in my name must be rooted in discernment, because the realm you now operate in carries no room for careless conversation. Life and death are not poetic ideas to you anymore. They are laws activated by the declarations you release. That's why I refined your speech in previous seasons. That's why I taught you silence before sound. Because now your sound builds, shifts, opens, and closes. What you decree from my spirit will not return void. You've graduated from reactionary language into prophetic release. So be deliberate. Be pure. Be intentional. I've entrusted you with a level of spiritual authority that causes doors to open before your footsteps even arrive. It's not magic. It's maturity. I've watched how you yielded when it would have been easier to push. I've seen how you waited for my whisper before you spoke. That is why I can trust your voice in this season. Your mouth is no longer just yours. It's a vessel of kingdom activation. When you speak healing, healing will be established. When you command breakthrough, it will be set in motion. When you rebuke darkness, it will flee. Not because you're louder, but because your words are now forged from revelation, not reaction. You've entered the place where idle speech is no longer safe. The veil is thin. The air is charged. The unseen world listens when you speak. That is not to make you afraid. It is to make you aware. Aware that your declarations are not suggestions. They are keys. Aware that your agreement with me will build structures that will remain long after you've spoken them. That's why I allowed your voice to be silenced in prior seasons, so you would learn to treasure it. You once cried that no one listened, but I was preparing you to speak only when heaven was listening. And now, heaven is. Every prayer whispered in boldness, every proclamation made in truth, every command grounded in righteousness. It carries authority that cannot be revoked. This is the place where the seen is shaped by the spoken. So do not be careless with your conversation. Speak with conviction. Don't echo fear, establish faith. Don't speak according to what you see. Speak according to what I've said. Don't comment on chaos. Command order. Your language is not decorative anymore. It's legislative. You are releasing heaven's agenda into earthly reality, and it will not be delayed. As you speak, chains will break without explanation. As you declare, atmospheres will bend. As you announce, miracles will find their landing place. But this only happens when you remain rooted in me. Your voice is powerful, but it only carries weight when it flows from my presence. That's why intimacy remains your priority. Don't substitute strategy for communion. Don't swap revelation for performance. Stay connected. Stay tuned. Because I will speak through you with greater clarity, precision, and urgency than ever before. What you say next matters. It builds or it breaks. It births or it buries. Use it wisely. You're not echoing anymore. You're creating. And creation will respond. Everything I've walked you through has brought you to this moment. What was once hidden in the depths of my plan for your life is now beginning to unfold in real time. The scroll of your purpose, the very assignment written with divine ink before your first breath, is being opened, line by line, not in front of a crowd, but before the eyes of heaven. And I say this with urgency and compassion. Now is not the time to retreat. Now is not the moment to question whether you're ready. I wouldn't open what I haven't prepared you to carry. I wouldn't reveal what I haven't already built the strength within you to fulfill. You've cried for direction, pleaded for clarity, begged for insight, and now, here it is. But it will not arrive as you imagined. It will come like a whisper in the middle of motion, a prompting in the middle of obedience, a stirring in the middle of your surrender. The scroll is not a performance plan. It's a blueprint for impact. And I am showing you sections that have been sealed for years. I guarded them from premature exposure so they would not be tampered with by fear, doubt, or outside interference. But now, I am unveiling the deeper layers. And you'll begin to notice how old wounds suddenly make sense. How strange delays now seem strategic. How every previous season of silence prepared you to interpret what's being unveiled. This is not the season to play small. This is not the hour to hide behind past versions of yourself. You have outgrown what once fit. And shrinking back now would be betrayal to what I've built within you. The scroll is opening, not just for information, but for activation. Your hands are about to touch what your spirit has long carried. Assignments are aligning. Connections are forming. Unfinished chapters are being called into completion. And I need you fully present. I didn't bring you this far to see you retreat into insecurity. I called you out of the crowd because I knew there was more in you than what others could affirm. This scroll is sacred, and it's yours. Lot inherited from man. Lot borrowed from culture. It was etched by me, and it carries your name, your fingerprints, your fire. And as it opens, you'll begin to feel things in your soul you thought had died, dreams you buried because life got heavy, visions you released because you thought they passed you by. But I never forgot them. I simply buried them for the right season. And now that the scroll is unfolding, resurrection is happening inside of you. You'll begin to hear with sharper discernment. You'll begin to speak with greater precision. You'll begin to move with more courage, not because everything is easy, but because you finally know, this is what I was made for. This is what I survived for. As in what I've written of a word of. The unveiling will not come with thunder, but it will come with authority. It won't be loud, but it will be undeniable. So stop doubting your steps. Stop questioning your readiness. I wouldn't open this scroll if you were still in the middle of formation. I open it now because you're ready, not perfect, but prepared. You've passed through fire and didn't burn. You've been crushed but not destroyed. And now, the evidence of my faithfulness is written on every line of your calling. Read it with boldness. Walk it with reverence. Declare it with unwavering faith. What I've opened cannot be resealed, and what I've written will not return void. Long before you arrived here, before you prayed the prayers, faced the trials, endured the silence, I had already released instructions into the heavenly realm to secure your journey. This isn't just a path you chose. This is a route ordained with protection woven into every step. You're walking now in places that were once barricaded by darkness, but I cleared the way through divine intervention. Not by removing every obstacle, but by assigning angelic hosts to encamp around what I've called sacred, and that sacred thing is you. You were never alone on the road, even when it felt barren. There were sentinels positioned around you in places too deep for your understanding. They were not sent to entertain you. They were dispatched to preserve you. Every time destruction drew near, they stood between you and disaster. Every time fear tried to paralyze your momentum, they warred silently on your behalf. You didn't see the accident that almost happened. You didn't hear the conversation that was meant to derail you. You didn't feel the full impact of what was aimed at your identity because they intercepted it. I commanded them not because you were perfect, but because you were chosen. There is a holy assignment on your life that demands divine reinforcement. That's why you couldn't be taken out, even when the pressure intensified. That's why doors closed suddenly, to redirect you onto the guarded course. I wasn't just leading you somewhere, I was shielding you while you moved. I covered your nights when your thoughts raced out of control. I stood between you and anxiety, sending my messengers to flood your space with peace. You assumed you were enduring alone, but my army surrounded you, unseen but never inactive. And now, in this hour, I speak this with clarity and urgency. Your feet have entered a realm where your authority is met with heaven's backing. You're not just walking with purpose, you're walking under protection. Assignments from the throne have gone forth, and the very air around you is now charged with divine surveillance. You are moving through territory that has been spiritually prepared for you. When others try to access what's not theirs, they encounter resistance. But when you step in, the gates respond, not because of who you are in the natural, but because of what you carry in the Spirit. You are now aligned with angelic timing. Movements that once felt heavy will begin to flow. Delays that once bound you will be broken by unseen hands. You won't need to force doors. They will recognize your arrival. Not because you're strong, but because you're surrounded. This is why you couldn't take detours that others manage. This is why compromise sickened your spirit. This is why shortcuts never worked for you. You've been walking on ground marked by covenant. And covenant paths come with assigned guardians. Every promise I've spoken over you is protected. Every step into destiny is covered by orders that cannot be revoked. So do not fear the shadows ahead. They are powerless against the light that goes before you. I've already dispatched what you need for what's next. And those angels, they don't flinch in chaos. They don't retreat in warfare. They are aligned with my voice, and my voice has said, go with them. Stay close. Watch for the signs. Listen for my nudges. The guidance you receive now is not random intuition. It is the coordinated response of a kingdom fully invested in your forward motion. You are walking among realms that respond to your assignment. And no weapon formed against you will prosper, not because of luck or coincidence, but because I commanded heaven to accompany you. Walk boldly, child. You're not alone, you're escorted. Everything you've walked through, every hidden chapter, every quiet yes, every surrendered dream, and every tear-soaked night has been converging toward this very second. You didn't just stumble into this hour. You were born for it. Before you had a name on earth, you had an assignment in heaven. And now, what was written in eternity is beginning to manifest in time. This isn't coincidence. It's convergence. I orchestrated every delay, every route, every stripping, not to confuse you but to calibrate you. I needed your heart purified, your motives clarified, your faith solidified, because what I'm releasing now requires someone who isn't moved by fear or applause. You're not standing here by accident. You've been positioned with intention. I placed something within you that could not be activated until now. There are deposits of wisdom, wells of boldness, dimensions of clarity that I have held in reserve, waiting for this precise alignment. You've entered the moment where everything I buried inside of you begins to rise. Don't call it new. It's not new. It's you. The you I designed before trauma tried to shape your identity. The you I protected when rejection tried to silence your sound. The you I whispered to in the wilderness when no one else could hear. You are now stepping into the rhythm of who you've always been beneath the noise. And child, I need you to see this moment for what it is. A divine invitation, not just a season of opportunity. This is not something to survive. It's something to steward. The doors opening before you are not random chances. They are covenant fulfillments. This alignment isn't accidental, it's architectural. You're standing inside a divine pattern. The pieces didn't come together because you pushed. They fell into place because I said, now. My timing is not triggered by pressure, but by purpose. And your purpose just intersected with my release. That's why things are moving at a different pace. That's why rooms are responding to your presence differently. That's why what was hard yesterday is suddenly unfolding with ease. It's not because you've changed overnight. It's because you're finally standing in the place I always intended for you to occupy. And in this place, things move by instruction, not by effort. What once required striving will now flow by surrender. This is the rhythm of divine alignment, and you're living inside it. But hear me, beloved. Do not shrink in this moment. Don't disqualify yourself because of past mistakes. Don't question the invitation because of former silence. I don't choose the perfect, I choose the prepared. And you are prepared. Not because of training alone, but because of testing. The kind of testing that shaped your character in secret. The kind that pressed you until only truth remained. That kind of preparation cannot be taught. It must be lived. And you've lived it. So when you feel the weight of this moment, don't run from it. Rise into it. When doors open, don't hesitate. Walk through them with reverence, not reluctance. When opportunities call your name, don't wonder if it's real. Know that I don't make mistakes with my chosen ones. This moment recognizes you because it was designed for you. And though you may feel the tremble of transition, know that I'm holding your hand in every step. You will not be swallowed by what's opening, you will be sustained in it. Because I didn't bring you here for a glimpse, I brought you here for fulfillment. This is the space where destiny and obedience meet, where legacy begins to unfold. And from here, everything changes, not just for you, but for those connected to your voice, your steps, your story. You were made for this moment. Now walk in it. Amen.